Okay, so we've bypassed our unit back here by turning these two bypass valves clockwise. You have to turn both of them, and again, they should be facing horizontal. That means that there's no water flowing into the tank. So what you want to do is you have to depressurize your unit, and by doing that, you want to go ahead and hit the regenerate button. And what you're going to do is you want to go through all the cycles so that it runs on like a big circle, the motor does. So what we want to do is we want to go through all the cycles and come right back to the service position so we can make sure that all the pressure is off the tank. Now to do that, once it arrives at its next cycle stage, these things are slow, so be patient. And when you hear it creaking and cracking like that, it's definitely time to be serviced. Usually it means that the piston is either in bad condition, you have a bad seal, or there's some kind of obstruction. Now to advance the cycle, we're at cycle 1, that is the brine fill. That's when it's usually adding water into your salt tank to prepare for the brine draw solution where it actually uses it to clean itself. So to advance the cycle, you want to press the raindrop up here on the right hand corner and the regenerate button, and that will make it go to the next cycle instead of you having to wait for it to do it naturally. And the next cycle is 2, and what you're seeing there, that's an hour and 20 minutes. That's just saying how long the water soaks into the salt tank. And then you want to hit the raindrop again and the regenerate button. And now it's going to go to cycle 3. Cycle 3 is your backwash. That's when the water flow is reversed. It lifts up the media bed to break any contaminants loose. And that obviously runs for 25 minutes. So again, you hit your raindrop and the regenerate button. And the next cycle would be 4, and that is where it pulls the brine solution that it has created into the tank. And that takes an hour and 50 minutes. Like I said, the newer equipment doesn't take usually this long. They've made some improvements, but this is how you do it for the AQC Gold Series. And then again, you want to advance it again, so you would press the raindrop and regenerate, and that gets you to cycle 5, which is fast rinse. That's where now the water direction is in its normal service position, but it's increased, so that way it can wash out all the salt water that was just added in, and then it gets all that hardness minerals out of your tank. So now we want to do it one more time to get back to the home position. Now, to open up the valve body, first thing you want to do is you want to remove your drain line. And by how to do that is, I can get it in here. You always want to get you a bucket or a catch can ready. You can always put it to the side. And most times these tubes are really limber. You can move them. You don't have to be gingerly with them or anything. But there is a drain clip, spaghetti drain clip back here that's kind of hard to see. I'll show you what it looks like as soon as I pull it. It's right next to where the drain elbow goes into the valve body. It looks like that. You want to pull that and set it to the side. Do not lose that, because if you do, you have just had to wait till a service tech comes out, because you cannot pick those up at a hardware store. So what you also want to do is you want to remove your metering wheel wire. Metering wheel or flow wheel measures water usage. And then you want to take your drain line. You want to pull it out from the tank and have it drip into a catch can. Well, luckily this one didn't have too much on it since we went through the full process of depressurization. So now, it's a good rule of thumb to always replace your drain line as soon as you get the pressure off, so that way you can be sure not to forget to reattach that. And then again, you would take your drain clip and put that right in, because the drain tube and line is not going to be in your way for service. If I can get it in there, bear with me. There we go. Okay. So now what you want to do, there's 2 screws. There's a dust cover screw on the back, you want to, it's just a real tiny screw, so a magnetic tipped screwdriver would be very wise to use. You want to unscrew, the first screw is a dust cover. And that comes out your first screw, and you can actually use the little faceplate as a shelf for your screws. It works wonderful. It's just like that way you don't lose anything. And we'll just set that over here to the side out of the way. And you want to lift your dust cover up. And there's now your next screw is where the screw attaches the piston rod to the head and the cam. So you want to unscrew that. Now this does have a very small washer in it, so make sure you do not remove that or lose that. If you do, it's not the end of the world, but it's just a good idea not to. And if these haven't been open a while, they can be a little stubborn getting them off. So just be ever careful going slow, and so that way you retain that washer and you do not lose it. Alright, the other thing you're going to need, and that was a Phillips head screw, by the way, and the only other tool you're going to need is a 5/16 nut driver. And you want to go to where the two 5/16 screws hold the head, or what's called the electronics, to the valve body. So you want to unscrew those, or just get them loosened up where you can pull them out by hand. Alright, 1 and 2. And then we're going to set those to the side. Now the valve body, or the head, should pull free from the valve body. You just tilt it forward and it comes right off. Now you can do one of two things. You can unplug your power if it's cinched up, which what we're going to do now because we don't have a lot of excess room and we don't want to knock our head onto the floor. But most of the time, if you have a long run of cord, you can always set it on top of something. So you just take that clip, unplug it. It's a standard clip, nothing hard about that. So you set your valve to your head to the side and leave it. And next thing you know, the last thing you have before you can enter the valve body is you have 3 5/16 screws. So, and also when you're doing this, it's a good idea to have a couple paper towels handy, because what's going to happen is water is going to want to drip a little bit out of the top of the valve body. So just put some right around the base, and that'll prevent too much water from getting on your floor. And it does not matter what order you take these screws off. And what I'm doing here with this valve applies to all Rainsoft valves. The only difference in these valves are the electronics on the front. All the valve bodies are the same. So it's all you have to do is, now we've got our valve body, or our top plate, excuse me, loose. And you just want to pull straight up. And what you're seeing here, this is a spacer. And there's always 2 seals surrounding a spacer. You want to pull those free and set them aside for inspection. You want to pull your spacer off. And inside this valve body there are 5 seals and 4 spacers. And what you want to do is you want to inspect your piston. This piston does not look bad. The discoloration is normal. What you want to look for is any big huge chunks of Teflon. This is a steel piston with a Teflon coating. What you want to look for is any bits of Teflon missing on the outside edges. The inside, it's quite alright if there's a little Teflon missing there, but the outside edges is what runs through the pistons, or the spacers and seals. So you just want to give and this is another reason the paper towel is good. You can always give it a little wipe and make sure you're not seeing any kind of nicks, abrasions, divots, anything like that. And like I said, that little discoloration won't hurt a thing. You just, like I said, want to make sure you're not seeing any smoking guns in here. Because most of the time when you hear that creaking and cracking, it just means that the piston needs to be re-lubed and, like I said, seals and spacers inspected. Now, you all probably will not have one of these, so it's a good idea to get something like a, I don't know what it's like, some offset needle nose or something so you can pull the spacers. Basically, this tool, all it does is you press the button, these two things pull out, so you can pull out your spacers. Now, you don't really need this on some of them. A lot of times they can pull free with just a finger, but if the valve body hasn't come free in a long time, you know, it's a good idea to have it. Just makes it easier. So again, 4 spacers, 5 seals. We're going to take every one of them out. So this is number 3. And so we'll have one more spacer after that. And then there's one more seal after that. Now there is a bottom spacer, but you do not remove that. That's just to protect the riser pipe that's on the inside from touching your bottom seal. It actually serves, it's almost like just a protection. So now what you want to do, always have you just like a little brush. You just want to brush the valve body circumference on the inside. And just make sure there's no deposits or anything, you know, something that's going to obstruct you putting the components back in. Take your paper towel and just give it a little wipe. Just to make sure that there's, you know, no iron. And now if you see a little bit of iron buildup like he has, that's not a big deal. That just happens over time. But now if this had been happening to where that spacer was really, really hard to get out, then it's probably time to call an actual technician, because what will happen is that valve body, when you go to put those spacers back in, if you don't get them just right, the top plate will not sit properly on top and the piston will not raise and lower. But fortunately on this one, it does not look bad at all. And what you want to look for on the seals is you want to look for any kind of tearing or any kind of deformities. They should all look just like that. I mean, it's just like an O-ring or any kind of seal or gasket you've ever seen. You want to make sure everything looks smooth. There's no sandpaper looking texture on the outside. Everything should be nice and smooth. Now, when you go ahead and redo this, you take your seal. This is a tricky part, and this one you might want to, if you're having troubles with, it just takes kind of like a practice. So you want to take the seal, you want to place it back in, and it's going to be a flat bottom, like they came out is basically like how they go in. And so the seals are going to reseat. See how the spacer has these grooves? Basically, if you lay this thing flat and then you take your finger and just go around, it should seat perfectly up against the spacer. It's always a good idea, like I said, have your paper towel just to give your top and bottom of your spacer a wipe, just so there's no iron or any kind of deposits on there. And then you can use your fingers, put your spacer back down in. Again, I recommend you try to locate yourself a spacer removal tool. And just, you want to go down on it, make sure everything is down in there the way it should be, and just give it a good push. Just like that. Just try not to squirt yourself in the face like I did. But it's no big deal. So, you want to double check that you have your spacer and seal right. All you have to do is lightly, and I do stress lightly, take your finger, and you can feel the seal and spacer where they meet. If there is a gap in between the seal and spacer, you do not have them correct. But if you can, like I say, lightly take your finger and just feel the inside, there should not be a gap in between the seal and spacer. Okay, so now we're ready for our next seal. Again, same process. This gets really mundane after a while, but it just covers your bases, make sure that everything is right. So again, you take the seal, push it down in there, and like I said, you want to go around the circumference of the seal to make sure it's laid flat. And it's once you just take your finger and push it on there, most of the time it lands on that top spacer very easily. Again, putting your spacer back in. Again, give your seal a good wipe. Same process, press it down, take your finger, go around the outside. And once you get the seal in there, you can actually feel the seal take to the spacer. You can actually feel it just groove up perfectly. Oops. And sometimes they'll hop back out on you, but that's a good sign, because if they hop back out that easily, that means you don't have to use your tool to press it back in. Again, seal, wipe. Give it a nice smooth finish. Just to make sure it went in perfectly again. And to note, the middle two spacers that are in the middle, water does not really travel through them. But it's just a good idea to, like I said, wipe them clean. Because most of the time, next time it goes through a backwash, it will clean itself. So you're not worried again about a little bit of discoloration on the spacers or seals. You're more worried again about seal integrity. So again, you would put that on there, and that's what replaced, or inspected spacer and seals look like. Now, when it comes to your piston, like I said, that little bit of discoloration we're not worried about. Now, you can sit here and take this and clean it up, and for the sake of this video, I will clean it up to the best of my ability. But again, the inside of this piston doesn't really matter. It's more the outside that you want to make sure doesn't have any kind of problems with it. And when I mean problems, you want to see like grooves cut into the outside edges of the piston. And if it doesn't have any of that, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with the piston. Then just give it a wipe. Now the next part, what you want to have, I suggest, because y'all are not going to have access to the lube that we usually have, so I would suggest using a little bit of vegetable oil. It works as a nice gliding agent. This is called Super Lube. And you want to use just a very little bit. And I recommend just doing it from the tube. All you want to do is push out just a little bit. Just very barely touch it. Then put your cap back on. Then you just want to take your finger. Sorry, my fingers are discolored. That's part of this job after doing it for a long time. You just wipe it around and make sure you have those outside edges nice and covered. Now you can also take the little bit of residue you're going to have on your finger and just rub on that piston rod inside there. And then you want to take it up and put whatever little bit of residue you have, you put it on top. Then you want to take it in your hand, the top plate, you want to take it and just work it back and forth a few times. That gets the lube nice and distributed along the piston rod. Alright, and so now we're ready to insert that. Now what you want to do here is you want to make sure when you put this back that the piston rod, which is this, you want to make sure the indentation is on the right hand side. And you want to see the letters to the front and the numbers to the back. And when you want to put it in, you want to make sure that the piston is pulled all the way up to the top. And you want to hold the top of the piston rod, press it inside the valve body, and then once you get it set, you want to push it down. At this point, now you do not want to touch it until you get your screws securely refastened to the valve body. So again, 3 5/16 screws is what you're putting back. Just set them in there for the moment. Take your 5/16 nut driver. And what you want to do, and now when you're putting this back on, you want to start these bolts or screws or whatever. You want to start till it just touches the top plate. Just touching. Barely touching. Now is the point where you really want to try to stagger these things down. So make a few turns with the back screw, a few turns with the side, and you just want it to go down, you know, somewhat level as you're putting it back down. Otherwise, if you do it the other way, you could possibly, you know, pin your piston up against, you know, just get it in a pinching mode where it doesn't really want to move back up and smoothly. Alright, so now we've done that. Now to ensure that you've put your seals and spacers, and this is why this is not that difficult, to ensure you've got your seals and spacers on there right, and I hope I do because it'll be really embarrassing if I don't. But to make sure that this is in right, you want to be able to move this piston rod up with your hand. If you're not able to move that up with your hand, you have something wrong. And you will have to take apart the top plate again and restart that process with the seals and spacers. And see what, you know, you might have actually put in an extra seal, or there's probably, more than likely, there's probably a gap in between one of the seals and spacers. And once you pull it all the way up like that, the piston rods on these are a little bit longer than the actual head, so when you pull the piston rod up, you want to take it and go down just a little bit. This is a sight thing, to where that way it's usually about right there. I know it's kind of hard to tell from the video, but you can see when you try to put the head back on, because putting the head back onto the valve body is probably the most frustrating thing of this whole job, believe it or not. Because Rainsoft has this little set tab that can always be in the way, but I have found that if you get that piston rod to just the right height, where you're lining it up with this cam, it'll be real smooth. So this cam you want going into this hole, and this is the screw, you know, that tops the piston rod to the head. You want to make sure that this one is sticking out just a little bit beyond the piston rod. So when you put that back on, I'm going to make it look real easy, folks, but I promise you it's not. Because it will frustrate you when you first start doing it. So you want to look. Okay, so I have my piston rod a little bit too low. So what I want to do is I want to take it off, and I want to just inch it up just a little bit. And there, see how it just slides right on. Once you have that little the cam sticking out just, I would say, about barely 1/8 of an inch past the, you know, the flat part of the piston rod. Now it's really simple. And also, if you think you may have your head on wrong, or it's not on wrong, these screws will tell the tale. If these screws don't just easily drop in, if you're having to force the screw, you do not have the head on correctly. So that's another good fail-safe. So then, like I said, you want to take your and retighten these down. Now these don't have to be, you know, Superman tight or anything. Just, you know, about a quarter turn past, you know, hand tight on your nut driver. And then you will go back to your Phillips. And again, make sure you remember your washer. You want to put that on the screw ahead of time. And then take it, I always put it on the head of my screw. That way, especially if it's a magnetic, you don't have to worry about dropping it. I don't have a magnetic, so that's why I'm very glad I didn't have to fish this thing in for the purposes of this instruction. So again, just tighten that on there. Then you can take your dust cover plate, flop that back down, and then you are one screw left. And again, this is on the side. This one's kind of hard to see, but just kind of set it in there, and then take your screwdriver and just, and like I said, this doesn't have to be tight any. Like I said, this is just a dust cover. So as long as the screw's on there, you can, you know, leave it somewhat out. It's not going to hurt a thing. And then you take your metering wheel wire, and the hole is really easy to fit. Just plug that right back in. And then you would take your power that we had set to the side, and just, you know, remove your little paper towel there for you, get that out of the way, and then just, like I said, the clip goes on the bottom. Just plug the power back in, and there you have it. That's called a successful rebuilt valve or valve inspection. Now, if you had new seals or anything, you need to replace them, obviously you would be here. You would replace your seals and parts as needed. But like again, what you're looking for is seals that are broken, torn, or just use common sense on that level. And that is it. That is how you service a Rainsoft valve. Good enough.